Hello, thanks for joining me. Today's video will be a book review called Walking Through Anger by Dr Christian Conte. Now, some of you may have heard of him before. He's a very famous counselor in America. He runs a YouTube channel and he also appears on TV shows in the States. So, why did I buy this book first of all? Well, I've been watching Dr Christian Conte's videos for quite a while. I'm one of his subscribers. And I wrote in with just a question, and he was very kind enough to make a video on it. So I thought, you know what, I'll actually, get this book and see what it's all about, because he's an anger management specialist. So I mean, I think anger is quite an interesting thing to kind of read into, because when employers, I've noticed this over the years, employers ask you, how do you handle conflict? Very kind of common question. And I was thinking, well, working environments, you might come across people who are actually hostile, out and out hostile, aggressive, angry, and then you also can come across people who are like passive aggressive. So I thought, let's do a bit of research, read his book, and kind of find out what it's all about. So the blurb at the back, called "Listen, Validate, and Explore Options," are the three kind of principles to what he calls yield theory. And that's basically what this book's about, and it goes into in depth explaining kind of the principles behind it and some of the methods which you can use to kind of diffuse situations which could be potentially angry, difficult, dealing with maybe angry people. Okay, so I've read this book and I've made some notes along the way, so I'm just going to kind of basically go through it with you. So there's 10 chapters first of all. And chapter 1 is, what is chapter 1 about? Chapter 1 is about yield theory, and he says yield theory, compassion as the cornerstone of communication. So I'm just going to kind of read you an extract here and then kind of explain it, what my interpretation of it is. So it's just my interpretation. I may be wrong. It's just kind of how I view it. So it says here, being willing to face conflict effectively takes knowledge, self-awareness and practice. The more you know about yourself and about how to handle highly charged situations, the more confident you'll be in handling them without allowing your energy to be changed by them. I thought this was quite interesting because when you kind of come across maybe a situation which is emotionally charged, having your own knowledge about yourself will help you to better deal with situations. And from this as well, I kind of got the message that to master your own moods. So mastery in that respect, I think, is where your energy levels are here. If you're in, say, a good mood and someone else's energy levels are down here, if you can control your mood, that person won't bring you down, and I think this probably takes a lot of skill. Your mood, your energy levels will bring the person up. So I think that's what Dr. Conte is talking about when he's talking about mastery. Intelligence is knowing information, but wisdom is practicing it. So essentially, I think that's just saying take action. It's great to understand intellectually that attachment to ego is at the heart of many episodes of anger and conflict, but being aware of what triggers your ego and understanding. So I think what this is talking about is basically having a self-awareness, and also kind of not having the expectation or the opinion that you are always right, and being open to different ideas. I think that's what he's talking about. Very important point here. Avoid making impulsive decisions. Some people have said, if you're in an angry mood, to remove yourself from a situation or to lie down, but never make especially an important decision when you're kind of in that emotional state. I think it's a very important point to connect with people, because building connection is a good starting point for building rapport and building trust with people. So let's have a look at the next part. Although it's true that you cannot change others, only yourself, it's also true that you can have an impact. The key to affecting others in a way that ignites a change in them begins with you meeting people where they are and not where you think people should be. I thought this was a very good point, and I remember watching in one of his videos, he used a story where someone was at the top of a mountain and a group were down here, and the guy was shouting at the top, why are you guys not over, at the top here with me? So Dr. Christian Conte explains that, you have to go down to meet them where they are and then kind of help them get to that point, maybe in kind of small incremental steps rather than taking big leaps to get to that place. But if people are not, if you don't meet people where they're at, they're not really going to listen. And I think that is an important point there, to kind of build rapport with people, because it can help to build trust and also to kind of meet people where they are, really. Let's have a look. Right. So I just thought of another point, actually, like in teaching as well. You can't teach, for example, GCSE to year 7 because they're not at that point. So what you have to do, you have to teach from a level appropriate. So I think that is another way of looking at it, is you have to maybe differentiate your approach to a person's level where they are. Right. So it says, more close to home, consider... quite interesting point. More close to home, consider how many times you've wanted others to change so badly that you found yourself preaching at them rather than talking with them. You speak at others instead of with them, you will likely not be heard, so that's where you're going to isolate yourself from others. And so going down to the bottom of the mountain creates the opportunity for you to address conflict directly at its source. So yeah, so meeting people where they are. Now this reminds me of the toy way, where you have to go and kind of see things on the shop floor to see what things are like, and I think that's what kind of it's basically talking about there. Yield theory, it gives you the tools to lead with compassion so that you can effectively get around other people's defense mechanisms and communicate with them. So what he says in his book as well is that we've got fight or flight response, and what you have to do is kind of go past that, go around that fight or flight response to kind of encourage people to think more clearly. And I think he says when people are emotionally charged, they're not thinking straight, basically. So you want to kind of circumvent people's fight or flight response to enable better and clearer thinking in people. Right. So yielding does not in any way equate with giving in or condoning unwanted behaviour, but it does involve having the confidence to recognise and own what you do not and cannot know, and it most definitely requires having the courage to fully let go of the things that you cannot control. Learning to deal effectively with your own anger is a prerequisite to being able to help guide others through theirs. So this goes back to the first point that he makes early on about self-reflection. So if whatever kind of job you're in, what can be used in any kind of situation, whatever situation you're in, having self-awareness will help you be able to better manage and deal with conflict if and when it arises. So compassion at the core of the yield theory, and I made a note here that you don't extinguish fire with fire. So if someone is in an angry way, you kind of speaking in a way which is angry is just going to exacerbate and make the problem worse. And it reminds me of it's over, I think over 20 years ago, I came across this guy, I can't remember, a sociologist, and he said I think he's a German sociologist, and he had this term called Verstehen, which means basically no value judgment, seeing things from the person's viewpoint. And he talks about a lot about that in this book as well. Try and kind of visualize and put yourself in the other person's shoes, and it will help you to better understand their point of view. So it says here, from this perspective, conflict isn't about a winner and a loser, but about people joining forces to strike at a problem together. So that's what I think is a really good point there. It's about basically being solution orientated, but not you maybe suggesting the solutions, but basically guiding the person to maybe come up with solutions themselves. That's the third part, exploring options. But he says in the book as well quite a lot that you have to effectively validate people enough, because, well, basically when people are angry, what he says is that you should not say, oh, you're wrong for feeling in that way, because it will just make people feel worse. So it's to kind of acknowledge the person's feelings, and that's what he means, I think, when he says validating, is to kind of acknowledge the person's feelings. So this is about communication, one of the parts. It says, listen, I've just put here, listen to the words which are being spoken as this communicates influences. So, you know, basically when someone's speaking to you, don't just listen to what the actual words which are being said. Read between the lines and see if there are any other meanings which you can kind of deduce for yourself. And yeah, I think he calls this content and process. Basically, the content of words, you know, hot, for example, is a word, and then the process, the kind of way a person says it. So like the intonation, the tonality, and these kind of things. So it says, so listen effectively. Start by assuming others are communicating to you from the side of a box you can't see. So he gives a description in the book that I use this here. So say this is a box here. I can see from this side, maybe you can't see from this side. So assume that the person is talking from a perspective which you don't understand, or you don't kind of see it yet, and I think that will kind of develop a better empathy from the person, kind of trying to diffuse the situation. So the less attached you are to the statements of validation you offer, the easier you will make it for others. And I think what he's saying is, the less attached you are to an idea, it makes you more likable as well. And I remember in one of his videos, let's say this is his book, and he goes, these are my ideas, and when someone has a disagreement, it's not the ideas and relating to the person's identity, it's just simply the ideas. Ego, I think, is one of the problems when dealing with angry people, because ego has the sense of wanting to be right all the time. So I think I've put all defense mechanisms are about the preservation of the self, and ultimately the protection from death. I think essentially that's what the ego is. So you could say that in some ways, when a situation occurs and people maybe get into conflict, the ego, the sense of wanting to be right, really is like essentially a protection from like a mini death. Not the actual physical death, but from like mini deaths, if that makes sense. So I thought that was maybe a different way to look at the ego. And he talks in this book, he gives some phrases which you shouldn't say to people if they're angry, and I think from memory he said you shouldn't say, one of the words you shouldn't say is "you said," because if you say something to a person who's angry, you said that, and the person didn't say that, it can make people more angry. So an approach to deal with that is you could say something like, I thought I heard you say this, is that, or something along those lines, because then the uncertainty of what you think you heard the person say puts the onus on them to clarify, so then you're not kind of saying that a person said that. So it says your job is to explore options, facilitate the person to come to their own conclusions by looking at the consequences, maybe the pros and cons of each option. So basically what you're saying is that when you are going through a process of exploring options, so remember, listen, validate and explore options. When you're exploring options, you can't say you can't look at that option. And he says where a person who Dr. Christian Conte was dealing with, I think it was something like punching a person in the face. So Dr. Christian Conte said, okay, tell me all the options and then look at the consequences, because saying a person that they can't look at the options doesn't really help them to then ascertain what the pros and cons of each option are. And by going through each option, irrespective of whether it's negative or positive, helps a person to maybe come to a more logical conclusion based on more evidence of what is the right choice to make. And I think it's about empowering people to choose for themselves, because ultimately you can't control a person. All you can do maybe is help go with them to explore options, and then it's really up to the person to make their own choice. So that's it, guys. A review of this book. I would recommend you read it, because the more you are aware of these things and how people communicate, the better it will make you at communicating with others. And remember, the three processes are listen, validate and explore options. And Dr. Christian Conte said he made it those 3 points, I think, to make it easy for people to deal with anger. Because when people are angry, it's quite an emotionally charged situation. It can be difficult to maybe think clearly in that situation. So by making it a simple 3-step process, it helps people to be able to better implement it. So if you'd like to have a look at, if you'd like to buy this book, please click in the description in the link below. You can buy it from there. Thank you very much for listening. If you've got any questions or any comments, please put them in the box. Until next time, please like, share and subscribe. Bye bye.